Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more, so that we may fear less. Marie Curie. It's time for science, and it's time to talk about community engagement and citizen scientists. Our guests on this episode are Dr. Mwenda KudumuBiggs from the Fleet Science Center in San Diego and Emma Giles from SciStarter. Mwenda KudumuBiggs, the Fleet Science Center's Vice President for Community Service and Engagement, talks about why it's so important to connect people and families to science, the power of kids seeing their families involved with science, why science is at risk without including marginalized voices, and some resources to consider if you don't have a local science center. Emma Giles is the Manager of Public Outreach and Programs at SciStarter. We discuss SciStarter's goal of getting citizen scientists involved in 1 million acts of science in April 2024. We talk about what a citizen scientist is, the types of resources SciStarter offers, and what you can do to get your students involved with citizen science. It's time for science, and it's time to talk to Dr. Mwenda KudumuBiggs, who is the Vice President of Community Service and Engagement for one of my personal favorite places, the Fleet Center Science Museum in San Diego, California. I've been a fan of the Fleet for all the years I've lived here, and my two kids, who are both in their teens now, have been here dozens and dozens of times. Dr. KudumuBiggs is with me to talk about the importance of family and community involvement in science education, what museums like the Fleet offer families, teachers, and schools, and some tips for reaching out to your local science museum. So first of all, Mwenda, thank you for being here.
Awesome. I love that the Fleet is one of your favorite science museums.
Oh, I feel so lucky that Balboa Park is just great. I mean, I grew up in New York, and of course, zillions of museums there. And when I moved out here, I was like, oh my God, the Museum of Man and the Art Museum, everything's right here, and they're all so good. They're all such, world-class museums. So obviously, science museums are an amazing part of science education. So I just want to talk a little bit about what you do, first of all, for the Fleet. What is your role and what do you do?
So as you said, I'm the Vice President of Community Service and Engagement here at the Fleet. And under Community Service and Engagement, we have exhibits. We have Education Department. We also have the Engagement Department. And so all three of those departments work together in unison to make sure that as a Fleet, we have our pulse on what's happening in the community, as well as working with the community to co-create activities and projects and events, and really to help the Fleet on its mission. And our mission here at the Fleet is to realize a San Diego where everyone is connected to the power of science.
That is an awesome thing to say. I love that. Let's talk about philosophically, why is it important for families and communities to be involved in science?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because what is science? I mean, like when you ask that question, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. What do you think of when you say science? You have a shirt on that says science. You got a button now that says science. Well, what does science mean to you?
To me, the universe, a little bit of everything. I think science permeates all things. I come from an art background, and there's science and art. And so science has always been a hugely fascinating subject to me, probably since the time I was a kid and watched the Carl Sagan show Cosmos with my dad.
Absolutely.
So yeah, for me, it's a little bit of everything.
Absolutely. And that's the correct answer to the question you asked me. I mean, it's so important for families and communities to be involved in science because it's about everything, right? Science isn't just about facts. It's not just about concepts. It's more importantly about questions, right? It's about asking questions. And so just like I asked you, what does science mean to you, right? That's what we're here for, right? So the Fleet is more than just a physical place, a physical museum. We do a lot of work in the community. We want to be known as your neighbor in the community in San Diego, any community in San Diego. But beyond just that, we really are about an inquiry-based, hands-on, interactive involvement and engagement in science, whether it's physically coming here and engaging with one of our exhibits or our films or many activities or events that we have, or coming to schools. We go out to schools or out to communities. We're at fairs. We're also co-creating activities with communities as well. So all of that. And it's important for families to be involved in that, because when their voices are heard, when families are involved with science and they have their youth and their elders involved in science, then not only do they understand the role of science, but they can be involved in the whole conversation, right? So it means that when people who are a part of science industry start to think about things that they want to do to push industry forward, community should have a voice in that. When we think about science from the perspective of government, right, communities should have a voice in that as well. So it's hugely important for all aspects of life. And that idea of how you answer a question and ask a good question, we all need that, no matter what our field, right?
Exactly, yes. Being able to question things and figure out for yourself.
Absolutely.
And I definitely think in terms of families, it's always great, I think, to see parents involved, because it inspires the kids. The kids
Absolutely.
see, they mirror what you do. If you're interested in something, they'll suddenly be interested. And one of the things I love about the Fleet and other science museums is all the hands-on stuff.
Yes.
Kids just love that.
Yes.
And whether or not they're getting something directly, they're getting something. You know, it's putting seeds in their head, which is awesome.
Absolutely. So. It's like what you just said, you know, and I'll say it the way my grandmother used to say, kids don't do what you say, they do what you do, right? So when they see you doing science, when they see you're involved in science, which is why we love when families come to the Fleet. So studies have shown that, and I've read some research that says that it's not the one-on-one visit, one-off visit that a kid makes to a museum that makes them a lifelong museum goer. It's when they come with their families. When they come with their families, they come back with their kids when they have families. And that's how we continue.
Yeah. I always feel very lucky to have Balboa Park, like I said, because of everything is right here, and it's inside the middle of San Diego, so it's great. It's not like you have to drive anywhere. It's like here. It's part of the park, and people just wander by and go, ooh, a science museum, and they come in, and I love that kind of stuff. As I was sitting out here waiting, I think 4 or 5 buses of kids came in. So obviously that's probably a daily thing for you guys. So what kind of outreach do you do for teachers? One of the things I think that would be interesting to our listeners, to a lot of elementary science teachers, is you said you do some outreach to schools and going to schools. What kind of things are those?
So we do lots of things with schools. We do family science nights where we provide science programming, and they can either through their PTA or through their schools have some events for parents to come to their school and have science activities there. We do shows where we do big scale demonstrations. You want us to blow something up for you? We do that at school.
That's the best stuff for kids.
School assemblies, right? And then we also do workshops, hands-on workshops, interactive workshops where we work and have a slew of those that where we work with the teachers. And also we have teacher professional development and teacher trainings. We come out to schools and do that. We also offer those here. And then also at sometimes a third-party site will offer professional development for teachers. So all of what we do is not just about giving some kids some stuff to play with and have fun. Yes, it's about that too, but it's also about modeling a way of asking questions. I'm back to that again, right? So when we do workshops here with schools here in the building, where schools do a field trip, they'll also see a film, they'll also do a workshop. We model what it means and what it looks like to do inquiry-based science in your classroom. So our educators are trained to model that. When we go out to the classrooms, we model how it can happen in your classroom. We also connect teachers to scientists. That's one thing that's also great about being in San Diego. It's so richly diverse with science and STEM industry, scientists, mathematicians, engineers, technologists, all over San Diego, right? And so when you look at San Diego County, how do we link them to schools? How do we link them to teachers, right? And so we're able to do that, and so that teachers can have access to scientists that will come out to their classroom, that they can talk to if they need help with some of their curriculum that they're working on, things like that.
That's great. I know that, of course, teachers who have been in the trenches know exactly what to do and where to go. But a lot of, I think, newer education, elementary school teachers who may be a little intimidated by science, who do they reach out to at their museum? Is it obviously somebody like you, or just, encouraging them to reach out to the museum to find out about these programs?
Absolutely.
Who do they contact, basically?
Well, absolutely. So here in San Diego, you can reach out to our education department. But I've worked at science museums across the country. Like I was telling you before, I used to work at Lawrence Hall of Science, right? Yeah. And I worked at Children's Museum in Manhattan. You were talking about, you were from New York.
Yes,
yeah. And also I worked at California Academy of Sciences as well. And so working at a lot of museums across the country, they have education departments. And part of the vehicle for reaching the mission, whatever the mission may be, of each institution, no matter what it is to infect a love of science, right? That's what we really want to do, right? All of them have, as part of their vehicle, some outreach to teachers, some way of working with teachers. And so contact the education department of your local science museum. Let them know that you're interested in, either professional development, or you want to be linked to a scientist, or if you want a workshop for your classroom, or you want to do a field trip to the museum, but you don't want to just set your students free, but you want to have an engaged field trip where you go deeper into what it means. And so, the science museums, all the ones that I've worked with over the 30 years that I've been working in science museums, they will be very excited to work with you on that.
That's exciting. The other thing we wanted to make sure we cover is the idea that, we get to brag about being here in San Diego and all, but a lot of places may not have a museum. They may be in a rural area or different parts of the country, may not have access to a big city museum or whatever. Mm-hmm. What kind of online resources do you have? I'm sure the fleet has its own sort of things. Can they come to your site? Can they go to other sites and find these things?
Yes, they can come to our site, and we link to other sites as well. The fleet is a member of the Association of Science and Technology Centers, ASTC, and as a member of ASTC, we have links to sister organizations all across the United States. And so if you come to, fleetscience.org, and you actually go and you can look and see some of our partner organizations, I would encourage them as a member of the community to join their local science museum. Because when you join your local science museum, and if it's a member of the ASTC, when you travel outside of your city, you can go to a museum there for free.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, I'd known about that.
Yeah. So become a member here at the Fleet. Yeah. And then when you go up to places like, Cal Academy and, up in Seattle to the Pacific Science Centers, all these science centers, you show your membership, and you're also allowed in free there. We have sister relationships with the science centers. And so, it's very cool. If you do not have a science center in your area, and if you're in a rural area, the other thing that I would encourage you to do is to really work with your librarian. Your local librarian can be so helpful in terms of getting you connections to other resources that are available in the area. And then there are workshops and online. We do provide some online workshops that you can participate in as well.
That's awesome. I'm a big fan of librarians. I'm a comic book graphic novel guy, and librarians are the greatest people on the planet. That's all I can say.
Yes, I agree.
Another thing we wanted to talk about is reaching underrepresented or underserved communities in local areas, making sure we're reaching out to schools that have not. There are other schools that have great science programs and other ones who may not. Does the Fleet do things like that, and how important is that?
So that's hugely important. Thanks for asking about that. So as part of our strategic plan and our initiative, in San Diego, we have 4 neighborhoods that we are focusing on: San Ysidro, Barrio Logan, National City, and the greater neighborhoods of Southeastern San Diego, right? And in those neighborhoods, we're looking to focus STEM resources and our ability to reach out to communities and work co-creatively with communities to bring those STEM resources to those communities, to those neighborhoods. It's hugely important. Right now, it's unfortunate, but science is very lopsided in terms of how it represents the United States, our science in the United States. It really needs to add everyone's voice. STEM is lacking the voice of women, people of color, and people who are living below the poverty line. And so when you take the voices of those people out of the science conversation, then you get a conversation about STEM that is becomes very lopsided, and so it doesn't have all of the resources that we have to offer here in the United States towards that conversation. And so when we look to address issues, we're only addressing them from a certain perspective. When we think about innovation, and they say necessity is the mother of innovation, right? So what happens if all our innovation comes out of people who want for nothing, right? Then what happens, right? And so it's like when we think about all of the things that we could do if we include the voices of marginalized people, whether it's gender, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's race, whether it's colorism, whether it's ethnic background, linguistic background, all of these things, when we add these voices, right, to the STEM conversation, it's going to change STEM. And it's going to change it in a way that's going to be more responsive to all of our needs. And when we do that, it's going to be richer. It's going to be more developed. And it's going to be more advanced. So science needs it. STEM needs it, right? And the community needs it, right? So it's not just that we at the Fleet are like, oh, these are communities that are quote unquote disadvantaged or, at risk, right? Science is the one that's at risk. Our whole country is the one that's at risk, more so even than specific communities, because we lose out on the genius, the innovation, the interest of those voices. So the Fleet is dedicated to bringing everyone in San Diego, to the science conversation, to the science table, and realizing a San Diego where everyone is connected to the power of science.
I would think that that's got to be a universal thing for science organizations across the country, too, is the understanding that there is sort of a tipping point, it feels like, in our country of science and anti-science and the need to get it out there. So it's wonderful that they can reach out to organizations like the Fleet and others to get that kind of help if they live in those kind of neighborhoods or places where they may need this whole thing to happen. That's awesome.
I mean, not just reach out, but be a part.
Yeah.
Come join. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Come lend your voice. Come lend your hand. Come lend your presence to these science centers and change them. The minute the Fleet said that we're off on a strategic plan to realize a San Diego where everyone is connected to the power of science, they had to recognize, because they came up with that mission before. I just started here in April, so before I got here. That's part of the reason I came, because I was like, wow, I want to help do that, right?
That's a great mission.
Yeah, awesome, right? And it was like, wow, I grew up in San Diego, where was that? I'm down for that, right? And the minute they put that out there, they knew one thing: it was going to change the Fleet. Because it's going to change us to do that, right? And that's so great. So come be a part. Come help change us. Come help change the world.
That is awesome. I don't know if I should ask any more questions because that's like the perfect ending. So I want to thank you for your time, Mwenda. This has been really, really enlightening. And I feel that the more I learn about this, I come from an art background and I'm the host, but I'm learning more and more about science education and how science and art are very connected and how science covers a little bit of everything. It covers math, social science, history, a little bit of everything. So it's wonderful that, elementary teachers who may not understand or really feel comfortable around science have these resources to come make them have that. And the kids love science. They just love the experimental nature, the questioning nature of it. And it's the kind of thing that I think helps across the board, no matter what field you're going to go into, this kind of questioning, as you said, right from the very beginning. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I would say it's interesting because someone asked me, well, does everything that you do at the fleet have to include science? I mean, can't you do something that doesn't include science? And I was like, okay, tell me what that is. If there's something that doesn't include science, tell me. And then we'll talk about whether that's true or not. But yeah, I'm also an artist, and so a visual artist, and science is all in what I do. So
it is. The combination of the two is so powerful, I think. And
Absolutely.
I think that's wonderful. Because I talk about this a lot on the podcast of how you would reach that kid in class who drew all the time. Well, that science is perfect for that. I mean,
Absolutely.
We need charts, we need graphs, we need visualizations, we need all these things. So, and again, not to come harp on it, but I love the interactivity of the things in the fleet and in science in general, because that's the kind of thing I think that gets kids going. They're using their hands, they're seeing these effects. They're not just concepts. This is what really happens, and it's right there in front of them. It's awesome.
Yeah, experimentation, right? Yeah. Being able to try something out, being able to do it over and over again, tweaking little small things and having different results so that you can see what works, what doesn't work, and why. And then you go home, you leave the fleet, and you go home and you think about, wait, why did that happen? And then, you try and figure it out, and you come back. I mean, when I was a kid, I came here, and the same thing, even when I was a teenager, I used to come here. And so, try and figure out what was going on. Ran into an old friend. He was like, do you remember we used to walk to the fleet when we were in junior high school? I was like, wow, yes, I remember. So, yeah, you're right. It's right here in the middle of San Diego, which is super awesome. Makes it very accessible, either bus, trolley, or car. And then, you can walk right up to it, and it's there here in beautiful Balboa Park, right?
It's hard. You don't have to sell San Diego too hard. That's what I found in my life. People want to visit us all the time.
Isn't that nice? Right.
Here's
it's
another
awesome.
reason. Another reason to come here is because of
but I think it's really important to say that we're not just a physical building, that we are really in the neighborhoods, that we are doing work. We're part of the STEM and STEAM fairs and festivals, helping to organize them that are happening in the communities and actually participating in them as well, where we've got lots of programs that are going on in libraries. We have a traveling exhibit program where we send our exhibits out to libraries. I love libraries too, and so we send our exhibits out to libraries, and that travels around as well. So we're physically in the community as well, and we want to be your neighbors. So
I think that's probably an obvious thing to say, but this episode is about family community involvement, especially as the spring break and summer comes, to be looking on their websites. There's going to be things every day, probably every week. There's going to be something going on in your local area that has something to do with science. So
absolutely.
Keeping your kids engaged over the summer and over spring break, things like that, and just in general, but getting on their mailing lists or whatever, there's always an event.
And there's these STEM and science festivals that are happening all over the country now. Yeah. Super exciting, right? Yeah. We got Expo Day coming up here in San Diego, but I know they have one in a science festival in Oakland that happens as well. I know they have science festival that happens all over the state of North Carolina. So these science festivals are happening all over. And if you don't know and you can't find where your local festival is happening, call your science center. Yeah. They know. They have that information.
Yep.
Super.
It's not like when we were kids. Just go online. It's right there.
Yeah, it is also online, but sometimes it's hard to know. Like, you can get caught up in the online thing. You do a search and you're not exactly sure.
Oh, it's always best to call and get a human. That's the best. Yeah. Talk to the education departments of the science center. That's the way to go.
Absolutely.
Mwenda, thank you so much for this.
You're welcome so much. It was great.
Well, it's time for science, and it's time to talk about family and community involvement in science. And I have with me today Emma Giles, who's the manager of public outreach and programs for SciStarter.org. Emma is the managing director of 1 Million Acts of Science for Citizen Science Month, which is April 2024. And she's here to talk about how teachers and families can get involved in a huge citizen science project in very simple and accessible ways. It's a really fascinating subject. So Emma, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Let's start off with what is citizen science in general, and what is Citizen Science Month?
Sure, absolutely. So citizen science is a term we use to describe when we have a collaboration between scientists and those of us who are curious and concerned and motivated to make a difference. It's essentially a way in which a regular person who's not a scientist, although they can also be a scientist if they'd like to be, they can participate in real research that's part of active projects going on in the scientific world. So it's a unique opportunity to kind of get to have a say in research and also just help the science get better. So the more eyes and ears we have looking at various things across the world helps the data become better and better. So it's a really big and global thing, which is excellent, which is why we have a Citizen Science Month. It's been several years now. It used to be Citizen Science Day. It has now evolved the last few years to become Citizen Science Month. And what that means is it's just essentially a big excuse to party it up citizen science style all month. That's what we like to say on this side of things anyway. And push for all of the projects to get participation, get more people involved, make it a really big community effort and a way to expand the family of citizen scientists.
I think that what fascinated me about it was the idea that I think it just makes science accessible for everybody. I think there are a lot of people who think, oh, science is done by scientists in lab coats in faraway places with big equipment. No, I mean, science is all around us. And that's what's exciting about it for our perspective, talking about with teachers and stuff like that. So what is SciStarter.org? Let's talk about your organization.
Sure, yeah. SciStarter.org is a giant database, essentially. It's the hub of citizen science projects, educational support resources, trainings, etc. We have tried to create a one-stop shop for people getting started with citizen science. There are several other platforms that we work with, so we're not competitors exactly. We're all working together to give people access to the same projects. So we're kind of a landing page to get to those other places oftentimes. Where projects and now there are projects to SciStarter, people can search them. We have a lot of different ways for the searches to be unique to you. So regional projects are important. And so they'll pop up depending on if you're signed into your account, and you'll be location specific. And then you can also earn badges with metadata attached to them to describe skills you've learned from doing trainings with us. So this would be things like the foundations of citizen science, where you do a self-guided training, you learn some things, it gives you a badge in the end. So we have a lot of resources for people to get started depending on where they're coming from, which are really important, especially when you're telling someone to do science. It's kind of wait, what do you mean? What you mentioned that we think scientists are the only ones who can do it. But I mean, no, that's not true. Although if it helps, having that ego boost and that confidence boost of doing a training really does help. It was the first task I had when starting with SciStarter is take the training so that you know what you're doing.
Always a good idea. So can you give us maybe a couple of examples of what kind of data people might be able to get starting, maybe something very simple, and then we can expand it out to maybe what teachers can do. But what is in general? What are people doing? What are they gathering?
So the rule of thumb is generally as wide as science is, that's how wide citizen science is. So if you wanted to look at images from a telescope that are looking at the sun and find comets that are called sun grazers going across the sun and passing it or just burning up on impact, etc., you can be one of the people who downloads that data of the telescope and look through those images to find comets. So you could be looking for that and helping us find we're near 5,000 comets, I think, is what they're close to. Yeah, very exciting. And most of them were found by normal people, not scientists, just going through this project over the last 20 some years. So that's one example. There are many like that, especially with NASA projects, because there are a lot of images from space. There's also projects in which life science is a big deal. So if you are looking at pollinators, we look for pollinator health data. So counting pollinators that go to a certain flower in your garden, seeing how often they show up, seeing what type of species. That helps us understand more about pollinator health. And the same for all species. There's a really massive project called iNaturalist, which is a platform of biodiversity data. And they collect everything from plants to animals to fungi, et cetera, anything that you can find wildlife in your area. It's all about identifying where these populations are across the world. And that one's used quite a lot in active research because it's such a big and successful project. So those are a couple examples. There are more, but
we just did a video for FOSS that was about monarch butterflies and how citizen science help track the migration and where they're going and how that's changing over time. And that was like my first experience. And now this, it's sort of like, wow, this is really cool. I need to get into this.
Do you know if it was Journey North that they were doing?
Oh, I don't know. I just say the video is basically about how citizen science can help, how normal people are doing this, tagging the butterflies or at least observing where they're going to be and how helpful that data is to the scientists studying it. It was really, really interesting. And now there's this. Now people can get involved in 1 million acts of science. So let's talk about that. That's a lot of science. I'm saying 1 million is a lot. So what is that goal? What does that mean?
Right. So 1 million acts of science, when we say active science, what we mean by that is an observation, a step forward into the citizen science world. So from everything from signing up for SciStarter so that you are making the first step into the world of citizen science, to observing movies of mouse brains to identify if there's a stalled blood clot or a stalled blood vessel, to determine or to help accelerate Alzheimer's research. It's everything and in between. Anything you do, going to an event, and trying out a new project and simply just being a part of it. Every single one of those actions that you do as a part of it, those are acts of science. And so we're trying to calculate as many as we can during the month of April. So we just gave ourselves the low threshold of 1 million acts to see how we do. And I think it sounds like this will be a repetitive, like we'll always be trying to meet that threshold in future years. And so this is our year to really test it out for real with all of the people who are already involved, get them back and re-inspired, and get everyone who is interested to be engaged with it for the first time if they haven't before. So it's essentially it's an even bigger celebration through it to see just how powerful all this research can be, is see how much can be done by the public.
Next year, we'll talk about 5 million acts of science for April. It'll be great.
We'll see. After this year, I'm curious if we'll have to change it. If it's too low a threshold, I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, it'd be nice. If you can beat 1 million, everybody likes that number. That's awesome. So specifically, we generally talk to elementary school teachers, some of whom are science trained, some of whom are not. How can they get involved? And maybe specifically, I like the idea of local. We very much push the idea of local science. Getting kids involved in their local area gets them more interested in science. So how can teachers use this maybe? I know there was an example of Girl Scouts using it, things like that. So how could a teacher use this to help teach their class?
Yes, and I actually was a 5th grade math and science teacher, mix those two together, math and science teacher back in the day, being not very long ago, but I taught for only 3 years, so I want to reference that just in case there are any teachers listening here who have
still 3 years in the trenches,
understand that perspective. 3 years in the trenches, good old Phoenix, Arizona. So when I was a teacher, or rather after I left teaching and joined SciStarter, it was interesting to me how often per day I would think, oh, I wish I had this like a year ago for my students. And so coming from that perspective, there is a whole lot you can do for your students and bringing them into citizen science. There are 3 off the bat that I can think of that are ways in which to engage with it regardless of what you're teaching. So if you are a teacher who's doing anything related to data or work with data with your students, data literacy is a really important skill, especially nowadays. And so learning it early is great. We have a training on data literacy to help them frame data in ways that citizen science uses it. And so when I was taking that training, the first couple of days I was on SciStarter's team, that was a major breakthrough moment of like, this is such an easy way to review data and see real life examples that are things that real people, not just scientists, do and work with these data. So it really makes data real to a person in a unique way. So we do have trainings that are relatable to kids or can be done as a whole class easily. And then the different projects that we have, you mentioned local. Our project finder, since we're a database of citizen science projects, we pride ourselves in being able to have a searchable database. And one of those features is related to location. So if you search for invasive species, for example, in the finder, or just the word invasive, you'll get off the bat, if you're signed in and have the location services on, it'll be local projects first. So when I did that, I actually did that the other day because it's National Invasive, NISA, National Invasive Species Awareness Week this week.
Wow, I
at the
didn't
time
even
of the recording. It essentially gave me 2 projects right off the bat about very specific species to the area I'm in, which is the DMV area, DC area. And so that was really exciting to find, because it was like, oh, I'm kind of in a weird spot. People are moving around all the time. Is there any research actually happening here? And absolutely, there always is, honestly. So anywhere that you are, there's probably something that relates to your section of the world that you can look up, even without looking up a specific topic. It'll feed you the ones that are locally to you first. And then the third thing would be that a lot of these projects are open data sets. And so if you're not ready for your students to contribute to a project, if they're too young, you can look at data done in or specific to your area. So even on iNaturalist with a big biodiversity project, you can find data specific to your area and actually have a conversation about what you see in the area that you're in. So maybe you want to talk about birds, then find all the bird species that have been observed, and you can just talk it through with your students and be like, these are the ones near us. So there are very unique ways to use it without even starting on doing the projects, but rather just looking around and seeing what's happening. As far as doing the projects, I can move into that.
Yeah. No, I mean, my next question was going to be I know that is there an app? Is they take photos and upload them or that kind of thing? So how does the actual data gathering work? And so in practice, how does that happen?
So if you are a teacher, the first step I would usually give you is to sign up for SciStarter.org. And I don't mean that to just be soliciting more people, I promise. It's more about you need to be able to collect the projects that you think are helpful. You can always save these links later, but it would help to be able to put them on a profile on SciStarter, because you can actually create lists for your students. So what this means is you find 3 projects that relate to a topic that you're talking about, you add them to your profile, and then you can actually create a list of these 3 and make them accessible to your students. So the actual practice of collecting data in this case, there are many forms. So from being online and just hitting a button, yes or no, or finding certain things in pictures. There's also collecting data via pictures. And so because we're a database, we work with a lot of projects that have different methods. iNaturalist, for example, is its own app. IC Change, which is a climate reporting app, that's also an app. But we have also like surveys through the Great Sunflower Project that looks at pollinator health wherever you are in the world. And that's just a form online that you fill out after filling out a data sheet. So, and that's not an app, that's just on the website. So there's various ways to do it. So as a teacher, the first thing we do with the teachers we work with, especially our partners in Broward County School District in Florida, they do the project themselves as the teacher, right? And they find out what the data submission is, because it might be that depending on the age of your students, especially, you don't want them to deal with a lot of the process. Maybe you just want them to collect certain things and then you're the one submitting the data. But in order for it to become citizen science, it has to be returned to the researcher. So submission matters a lot, but there are certain things that you should consider as a teacher of, does it make sense for them all to download an app if they're in 5th grade? Or does it make sense for them all to download an app as a sophomore? Maybe. Or like on Chromebooks or whatnot that you have at the school. It just kind of depends on your situation and what you want to do.
Like the youngest students, I mean, is this something that kindergarten can do? Is it, I mean, obviously, like you just said, a 5th grader versus a sophomore, but I mean, it seems to me the kind of thing that a teacher could very creatively use with kindergarten, 1st grade. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. We actually have a website page, or one of the sites on our website is SciStarter.org/education. So if you type that up, it actually gives you a list of projects based on grade level. I really like the page because it's just unique to see what level different kids are expected to be able to access. And it starts from pre-K. So pre-K, 2nd grade, and then from 3rd to 5th grade is a good like chunk of people, middle school. And then we even have for like late high school and for college level. So it ranges. There's definitely some that are incredibly easy to do, some that are incredibly difficult to do. So the ones that are for young kiddos, this would be something like one that I mentioned about the pollinators, the Great Sunflower Project. As long as you know how to count or need to practice counting, that's a really good exercise. Because if you can just write tally marks, that's why it's pre-K. It's you need to be able to say, oh, I see a pollinator, and then that's one tally, next tally, etc. So a lot of them are conducive to like group environments, especially if you're working with little ones, for that exact reason. Another one, which is a fun one if you're interested in ants, it's an ant picnic. So if you, yeah, who isn't into ants? What is it called? Metanology or something? There's a fun term for ant scientists, and I love it. the idea is that you're setting up a feast for ants, a couple different options. And so it's like a manual activity. So you don't even have to really engage them with the data collection. They could just do the process of setting it all out, looking at what happens, exploring those answers. And then as the teacher, you're the one who collects the final answer and submits it to the scientist.
That's great. I love that there are so many options, because obviously it's customizable. Whatever they happen to be teaching or what their kids might be interested in, that's fantastic. Well, I sincerely hope you crush the 1 million acts of science goal, because this is wonderful stuff. I think it's very, very hands-on. Teachers would love this kind of thing. Real world data. That's fantastic. So Emma, Giles, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
It's Time for Science is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lipman and Tom Racine, and is sponsored by School Specialty and FOSS, the Full Option Science System, at the Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley. Be sure to check out FOSS over on Facebook and Twitter.